It's moments like that you wish your parents were here. Yeah, because you know your mother would be proud and your father would be amazed. So thank you. I do have my daughter here. The other thing is, I do want to say beforehand, before I start on my formal remarks, as Henry Kissinger used to say, I look forward to your questions to my answers. So thank you. He's obviously serious. I'm joking. But on a serious note, before I begin, I do want to say to President Perez, which I had not had the opportunity this morning. It is rare to run into somebody who has lived a life worth living. And I wanted to bring my daughter on her bar mitzvah to meet such a leader. So thank you for having us. Second is to follow up on Prime Minister Blair. I think there's a couple things I would say just from the advantage point of both being an advisor to a president as well as my own as a mayor of the great city of Chicago. And that is, the first thing I always think about when it comes to leadership is failure. And what I mean by that is, and it's not the normal thing to look at, but is every person in leadership fails. And the real question is, do they learn from that failure? And I happen to think, and I've been fortunate in my life, to work for two great presidents, President Obama and President Clinton. I happen to also think that the greatest president we've ever had was President Lincoln, who went through a series of failures and failed generals. But at every step of the way, he learned something dramatic and more important about what he wanted to pursue. Went into the war thinking about how to keep the Union together, and halfway through it decided it was about ending slavery. And he learned that process. He also learned more about military strategy and uniting it with political objectives than he did when the front end. And I always used to say at the White House, if we knew in the first year of our first term what we knew by the first year of our second term, history would be different. So the real question of leadership is, what do you learn from failure, and do you learn anything at all? Because all of us have setbacks, every one of us. And to appreciate the peaks, you have to know how to pick yourself up in the valleys. And what do you take from that position? What have you learned from that moment in time? And how do you apply it to the next thing, and next experience, the next challenge you have? Second is, as I've always said, having worked with two presidents, my own level, what is the opportunity in every challenge? How do you seize that opportunity and create an opportunity where all you see are challenges? And I think that's pertinent as we look around trying to create peace today. Or as I used to tell President Obama, never allow a good crisis to go to waste. It's always the opportunity to do the big things you never thought were possible before. And in every crisis is that moment in time. You have to make something of that crisis. In many ways, and I just use this as one anecdote, from our time in the White House, when I said to the president, we were facing an economy that was going through not just a recession, the Great Recession, something far worse than we had ever seen in our lifetimes in 6 decades. An auto industry that was totally collapsing, not just one car company, but the entire sector. The financial system was all broken, not lending. You couldn't get a home loan, a car loan, a student loan. A business couldn't get anything. And we had 2 wars. So I went into him, I said, well, which crisis would you like to do? He says, well, we weren't elected to pick our crises. We have to do them all. That's why I started that job, 6'2" and 250 pounds, and this is all I got left after that process. But the truth is, you don't have to applaud to lost weight. Don't worry about that. The truth is, though, you take a look at where America's auto industry is today versus where it was. It was a byproduct of 30 years of delaying decision-making that had come to a crisis. And the president finally put in place a series of things that America's auto industry now is revitalized, creating jobs, more jobs today than it had before when it first faced a crisis. And that is a person who took a crisis and made an opportunity out of what were a series of challenges. In addition to that, and this I couldn't more wholeheartedly agree with what the Prime Minister just said, which is change is the only constant. Nothing ever stands still. And the question is for a leader, and especially in a democratic process, is can you make change a friend, not a foe, for the public? Because in every period of time, nothing ever stands still. Now, I happen also, now that I'm mayor, I also say, you know, the public hates the status quo. They're not too excited by change either. So they got us right where they want us, stuck between the two of them. But change is the only constant you will have to face. And as I worked for President Clinton, he always used to say that doing the same old, over and over again and expecting a different result is the first sign of insanity. And if you think something else is going to happen if you're doing the same thing, that's pretty clear indication. So you have to figure out how to make change work for people in a way where they are really set, not just in their ways, they're more comfortable with what they know versus what is at risk. And the ultimate thing for any leader is to then set goals for that public that they are very clear, very understandable, and what people get. What I often say, at least in the United States, where we have a big debate about education, I'm not an education reformer. I believe in educational excellence, and I will adopt any reform that gets me there. Too often, people think the means are the ends, and they confuse them with what the ends are. And if you're going to make change valuable and understandable to a public that is scared, you have to be clear about what your ends are for them rather than what your means are. Means are only a way of getting to the objective. And too often leaders confuse their means with what their ends are, and that's where they lose the distance between the public and where they are and where they're going, and getting to understand that. In addition, what I would also like to say, and then I want to talk a little about being the mayor of the city of Chicago in conclusion, and that is a leader must convey three qualities to the public: strength, confidence, and optimism. Last night you heard from a president who always talked about a place called hope. Nobody has ever elected the more pessimistic, weaker person in any democratic process, and it's not just an American phenomenon. And as Franklin Delano Roosevelt used to say, you have nothing to fear but fear itself. Ultimately, what people respond to from an executive is somebody who can communicate the qualities of both strength, confidence, and optimism. And that is what they seek from an elected official. Now, I happen to think that while we talk about CEOs and leadership, the CEO from the private sector is not comparable to the public sector. We're not here for profit. We're not here to actually try to make money. We're here to make public policy. And I actually think one of the things from leadership, we deride too often politicians. Actually, the job of a politician is to integrate politics, policy, and press. Is not to actually dismiss politics, but make it work for you in what you're trying to communicate and what you're trying to achieve for a public. Now, I happen to also, if I can, talk just briefly about being mayor. I happen to think in this period of time that, and the reason I'm happy to be, and I've loved working for two presidents, I love being in Congress, being mayor of the city of Chicago is the best job I've ever had in public life. It's the best job I've ever had. One is, first of all, across the world, national governments are not functioning. There are 100 cities in the world today that drive the economic, intellectual, and cultural energy of the world economy. People are moving into cities rather than moving out of them. It is where the cities are actually are creating the type of environment, atmosphere for the type of economic, intellectual, and cultural energy of our world economy. I happen to think City of Chicago is one of those cities, and it's in that top 100, but it is not guaranteed a place 30 years from now. What we do in the next 2 to 3 years in the City of Chicago will determine whether the City of Chicago in 20 to 30 years continues to be one of those 100, or whether it veers off into another space, another tier. And you have to focus on three fundamental things as a mayor of a city that actually continue to build what I think is a world-class city with world-class potential. One, the education of your workforce and your people. Single most important thing to do. And the importance of an education doesn't begin in school. The most important door a child walks through for the education is the front door of their home. That's where they learn the value of an education. Anything a teacher accomplishes is going to set and based on what happens at a home. Now, the good news for the city of Chicago is about 35% of our people have a 4-year college degree or better. Nationally in America, it's 27%. And our plan is to keep growing that growth. Because if I can provide every business in every part of our city, the most educated, most talented, most skilled workforce, we'll be a city that continues to grow. As the economist just noted, we're the only city in all of North America to move into the top 10 in global competitiveness in the next 10 years. Second is to constantly invest in our infrastructure. We have an airport, the only one in North America, where both major carriers operate. We have 972 flights daily anywhere in America and 167 daily anywhere in the world, weather permitting. We have more, and we're investing now the equivalent of putting a second airport at O'Hare. So Chicago can get to the world and the world can get to the city of Chicago. We have more people take our public transportation in a single month than all of Americans take Amtrak nationwide all year. So we're investing an unprecedented $4 billion in the modernization of our mass transit system and keeping connectivity throughout the system. New trains, new buses, every new station will be built, and taking 47 miles of new track that we're replacing. Third, the most important commodity of the future is oil. We have the largest water infrastructure project in America, replacing 900 miles of water pipe, 670 miles of sewer pipe, 2 of the largest water filtration plants in the entire world, and 160,000 catch basins for sewers. All of it being done in the next 10 years, all of everything I just said paid for. The most exciting thing for me, though, is also, Mayor, is that every child in the next 3-4 years are complete will be within a 7-minute walk of a new park in their city, right next to their home. Again, all paid for. 350 playgrounds rebuilt, 167 acres right now are being rebuilt, the equivalent, if you've been to our city, of 5 Millennium Parks, all being constructed throughout the city. And so making sure that every child, regardless of income, regardless of race, regardless of background, is next to a new park. And we're revitalizing our river next to our waterfront, our lake. And the reason that's important is the city of Chicago wouldn't be there if it wasn't for both the river and lake, but the most important commodity we have is fresh water. We have the 5th largest freshwater lake in the world. And we are going to continue to invest in preserving the water. I just told you about all that investment is the equivalent to saving 2 years worth of water loss in residential water loss. We will preserve each year by what we're building every year marked out. And lastly is both the leadership and the confidence people feel that comes out of the public sector. If they feel that that public sector is willing to shape their future, not be shaped by it, they'll have the confidence to both move there and create jobs there. And if the mayor or chief executive does those 3 things, keeps the skills of their workers and their public at the top notch, invests in their infrastructure so they can move goods and services most efficiently, and exudes the leadership that's necessary to shape a future and not be shaped by it, that city will be a city that's on top of its game. And an executive, in my view, now this is going to be a metaphor out of American politics, but I think it has international capacity, must always be on the pitcher's mound throwing the pitch rather than in the catcher's position receiving it. And if you're out there throwing pitches every day, you will have the leadership that creates your own conditions, your own environment, your own politics, that creates the context in which your public actually understands where it's going, what it has to accomplish, and sets the tone for what you need to get done. Thank you very much.